Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for investing your time with us today. The International Association of Female Artists, IAFA, is the world's leading organization for women artists. Its membership includes video artists, filmmakers, photographers, actresses, performance artists, folk artists, musicians, and creative writers. The mission of the International Association of Female Artists is to establish a platform and create a community for helping women artists worldwide. Art has a social role to serve, and the artist has a moral obligation to society. It can engage the social issues and the environmental of its day, either directly or indirectly. Not every artwork needs to address the poverty, famine, war, corruption, and injustice, but an artist should not ignore the pain and the suffering of his fellow human beings. Because of that, IAFA is hosting a series of panel discussions, collectively titled Artists Without Borders.
Privacy has always been a part of our nature, whether it is to protect ourselves from simple judgment or from actual perceived harm. Privacy, however, has taken on new meaning with the advent of the internet and digital technology, which tracks our choices, location, as it has come to be an integral part of modern day existence. In the age of surveillance capitalism, by Shoshana Zuboff, it states that we are now shaped by the devices that we use that lead us and shape our choices without our knowledge. This takes our notion of privacy to new levels. And as we struggle to know ourselves and maintain equilibrium in a global culture, we are spiraling out of control. It seems that we have less control of our own integrity in the eyes of the world, as our words can be misplaced, misjudged, misconstrued. These conversations that we're having today are a part of Artists Without Borders, and they're personal conversations from the artists themselves. And we would like to welcome Rosalie Ulton, Meng Tang, Jill Waterhouse, Jill Stebbins, and Joko Idu. Thank you for being a part of today's discussion.
Right now, the increasing popularity of social media has attracted huge numbers of people to participate in enormous activities on a daily basis. This results in a tremendous amount of rich users-generated data. This data actually provides opportunities for researchers and service providers to study and better understand the users' behaviors and further improve the quality of the personalized service. But publishing user-generated data risks exposing individuals' privacy. Users' privacy in social media is an emerging task and has attracted increasing attention in recent years.
The question of privacy, has been with us for a long time. We need to go back to 1984. Not to go back to 1984, but go back to Orwell's book, 1984, which was written years earlier, in anticipation of the changes that were taking place he's from England, in Europe. And that was government surveillance. Concern was expressed then, through different kinds of agencies and organizations, that people were being monitored under a dictatorial government. And there were three major powers. I haven't recently, been that familiar with it, but the speak and, the different language that came out of that was kind of a forewarning of what was going to happen in the age of technology. And so we are at that point where privacy is it's in a very small corner of our lives, if we even have that anymore, because everything is monitored. I think, Meng, coming from China, you should probably know better than any of us what's going on there in terms of monitoring the people. And as a result of that, things, cannot be expressed about government, about certain ideas and occurrences in a culture without being possibly vulnerable for some kind of internment. Um, we are in an age, technologically, where we don't have the control. And I think, as has been expressed, what can we do about it? I don't know. What can we do about it? We can stay off Facebook, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be monitored anyway. And the result of what's happening has capitalistic implications. That has been expressed in the age of surveillance capitalism by Shoshana. She has, made it quite clear that we're products, that the information that's gathered about who and what we are and how are we going to be targeted so that the next company can make money. And so it becomes, a massive capitalistic overtake. So we do have to be very careful. We do have to monitor, what we say and how we say it. And also be very aware of the invasion that is going to be imposed upon us, and the awareness, the consciousness of what this is about is where we are right now, becoming conscious of it. And whether there is an answer, I don't know, because we're getting more and more, the surveillance is getting more prominent in the culture. Facebook is a tiny little narrow spot in the whole picture. Well, with that, I mean, there's a lot more to say about that. What does privacy mean, and how does it mean to each individual? If our privacy is taken away, then how do we identify ourselves as unique characters, as unique creatures in the culture? That's where the artist comes in. The use of the artistic imagination is critically important, I think, at this time, in all of the art forms. How is that going to be expressed, and how is that going to be communicated to the broadest possible audience? But this is a global issue. This is not a local issue. And being global, we have to be aware of other cultures and how they function, as well as how we function, here in the United States. I think the pandemic, COVID-19, was a good example of the kind of mixed messages that is also a result of the media takeover. Where's the truth? I guess that ultimately
Exactly.
is the underlying, issue that we have to deal with. What is the truth, and where are we going?
I made a choice not to be on Facebook, and that's been the case for 15 years at least. My children are all on Facebook. I have generally thought that with so many people in the world, how could anyone be interested in me? And they're going to be bored if they try to look into my life.
One of the things that I'm really interested in is the issue of privacy as it relates to how we are being in the world. Because to a certain extent, I think that Facebook is somewhat contrived, because you put information that you want to be on there. I know that, as an Italian, I grew up in a culture that I didn't know it for years, but the culture is out of the omerta, which is the code of silence, which is about hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. So it is kind of a veil of privacy that is supposed to keep you safe, so that if you don't see anything, or if you don't allow anybody to really even see you, that you are projecting what you think you want people to see. So in a way, we are doing that now with all of the technology. What's happened is we now have a device which sometimes contradicts even the issues that we want to project. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying? That the issue that we want to project is to stay in that safe place of protecting our identity and who we really are on some level. But the devices that we use actually sometimes are allowing other things to happen, like with Shoshana's book, where they're gathering information about our location and about our choices as we scan the internet.
Yeah, I think Facebook is a very small part of it. The information, you know, that is projecting is very minor, really, because as you say, I mean, it's the kind of information, you know, that is positive, that you want everybody to smile about and be entertained with. That's such a small part of it. It's everything else that's being monitored. It's your doctor's visits, it's your education, it's your political
Affiliations.
well, it's the community in which you live, and the work that you do, and the kinds of things that that you send through the mail, that you receive in the mail. It's just about all of those things that are far more telling of how the government and how the capitalistic world is. Well, it doesn't, and not capitalistic. I mean, communist, capitalist. I mean, that's only one point of view or 2 points of view. Are manipulating this material, and I don't know that we have the freedom, or that we will continue to have the freedom to identify ourselves the way we want to identify ourselves, or are we going to be re-identified, by the media? I think, those are the issues that are critically important in terms of how we understand privacy and what that means. It also begs the question of the whole authenticity of things. What is authentic, and how do we protect that authenticity? Because once everything is out there, it's maybe available. It can be manipulated in some way. And that takes us back to, I think, an amazing insight that Walter Benjamin had in the age, art in the age of mechanical reproduction. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but that was also, where are we coming from in terms of ownership, in terms of intellectual ownership. That's another very big part of the question of privacy and surveillance. I think the big word is surveillance. Privacy is falling under that.
Yeah, I was really taken with some of the things that you and Meng said. I know for me, I think privacy is one of the key issues of our culture, but we aren't aware of it because it's not hitting us. Even though it's hitting us on a daily basis, we're not really seeing the impact until, for example, someone steals our Social Security number and gets into our bank account, But what we're not understanding is the multi-levels that it invades our life and the ways that it changes how we think. You were talking, both you, Rosalie, and Meng were talking about the concept of what I would call silo thinking, where everything that's fed to us is tailored to what we're already expressing an interest in. And it means we're not growing and expanding our viewpoints. We need to be challenged as humans about what we think. That's when you grow, is when you rub up against something and there's a sense of friction. And as artists, we need to be in that uncomfortable place a lot more often if we really want to build the kind of work that people want to see, whether that's painting or sculpture or, you know, whatever it is that you're doing. I think that inability to see beyond the bubble that we're in really limits what we end up producing and its impact and importance on the culture. And your point about 1984, George Orwell's book, I remember reading that when I was in, I think, 9th or 10th grade, and the impression that left on me was so powerful. I never, in fact, there's still lines in that book that I can remember verbatim. And it was the sense of not just your loss of privacy, but your loss of humanity, because the two main characters were tortured in such a way that they gave up each other. You know, they ratted on the person they most loved, if you will, in a way that was devastating, and it changed the way they could be with each other. They couldn't be with each other anymore because they had lost their own humanity. And I guess for me, that's one of my biggest fears, is that we're like lemmings walking to the edge of the cliff and we don't realize that we're about to go over. Because when we have a president like Trump, you know, his interest in that kind of information and being able to control what we think, what we see, what we feel, and dividing us as individuals and as a nation and as a world serves his purposes. But those purposes do not in any way benefit humanity. So I think we all need to step up and really look at, what does this mean for us? Not just me as an individual, because me as an individual, I'm just one person, I'm a cog in a wheel. But if we look at it for all of humanity, it can change everything about what we know, what we do, and who we become.
Yeah, I think what you say is extremely pertinent, and it, you know, it challenges intellectual property, and it challenges, you know, how we are and how we are going to evolve as people. We are in that transformative state right now, which is both exciting and very slippery, because we don't know where we're going and we don't know what kind of handle we can actually have on it. So we are presented with a major task, and where we're going to go with that is going to be, well, up to each individual. I mean, yes, you know, Jill, as you say, you're a cog in the wheel. We're all just little chains in the link, right? But each one, if we don't give up, will probably have some kind of impact, whatever that is, on where we're going with this. But the future is unknown. We don't know, because the power is enormous today, and it's growing very, very fast, with the surveillance monitors that are being put all over the community.
But I also wanted to add kind of a funny personal experience. At the time, it was more than a little disconcerting, but looking back, it was funny. I was director of an arts program, and they interviewed me on public television. And they asked me about, you know, how to get information for this program. And it wasn't, sorry, not public television, public radio. And they said, I said, well, where is this going out? And they said, oh, just the local. I think it was the MTN channel, just Minneapolis, maybe St. Paul. You know, and I said, oh, okay. So I gave them my home phone number so that they could call me directly to find out about the program. And a day or two later, I get a call from a gentleman who's an artist who was very interested in what I had to say. And he wanted to send me his art and have me take a look at it and evaluate it for him. And I said, well, I don't normally do that. But he was saying he just isn't able to get good critique. And I thought, you know, I can do that for him. So I said, well, you know, why don't I meet you somewhere locally? And he goes, well, I can't do that because I'm in Stillwater. And I said, well, that's not that far from here. He goes, no, I'm in Stillwater prison.
Oh.
And you could have heard a pin drop. It turns out that this MTN or whatever the broadcast was actually went into the prison. So all the men there who watched that had my personal home phone number.
No.
And yeah, it was a little bit of a yow. It turned out he was someone who had been wrongly convicted. I actually reached out to a friend of mine who was a public defender, and she knew about him. It's actually a really sad story, and I'll tell you off camera sometime, but it made me realize you have to be really careful about what information you're allowing to go out. You know, I trusted them, and my trust was misplaced because they didn't actually know where it was going. You know, so that's just one of those weird things where you think you're a willing participant, but you didn't know what you were participating in. And I think sometimes Facebook has that same, you don't know where all that's going. You know, or when someone I've had people take pictures of me, they did not ask me when I'm performing or when I'm in costume. I don't know what they're doing with those photos. And so sometimes I think I got to be a lot more careful about who I let use my image, you know, because you just don't know what they're doing with it. And usually it's not nefarious, but you never know. So word to the wise.
It's critically important. The fact that, you know, that Google and, you know, these massive, you know, operations that Bill Gates is responsible for, and all of the new technology that's coming in, and the what shall I say, mix match information that we're getting, puts us once again in a very precarious situation in terms of how we understand what is going on. What do we understand is, you know, what's going on? The lies that have proliferated, you know, these last several years under the Trump administration, you know, he can do and, you know, come in and out of an argument one direction, then another direction, and twist the entire position, you know, that's being taken. And he's done that. I mean, he's done that with the pandemic and caused a great deal of difficulty as a result. And we are in a position where we're asked to make decisions, but then how do we make that decision without clear boundaries and borders to follow? And we're missing that. We are, you know, we're flattening everything out. You know, Tom Wolfe said that very well in terms of our economic knowledge and so on. But we are so flat that we're not sure that we see the dimensions that are necessary to see. This is interesting. I hadn't thought about it in that way. But the comment, you know, back a number of years ago when Tom Wolfe, the world is flat, you know, challenges Galileo, the world is round, you know, where we were able to see great dimensions. And by thinking of the world being flat, which has great implications, and I like the theory very much, but I think we also have to be very careful that we have given up the dimensional thinking that is necessary, that could possibly, you know, play into this whole concept of privacy and how that is protected and how we are defined, you know, as a human race.
May I share one other point that's kind of related to that? Two parts. One is the idea that Facebook, for example, is not, or at least when I last checked on it, was not going to be screening for truthful ads. They were going to allow politicians to say whatever they want. And that speaks to your point, Rosalie, about how do you know what your vote is based on if you're not even getting the actual facts. So I find that very disconcerting. And the other one is, about maybe a month ago, I heard one of the scariest things I've ever heard about Facebook. There was a woman, they were interviewing people who have gambling addictions and had been literally drawn in by this gaming company that runs their game through Facebook. And get this, it is a gambling game at which you cannot win anything. So they say it's not gambling because you can't win anything, but what they don't spell out is you can lose a lot. This woman was up to about $40,000 in losses, and she called the company and asked them to cut off her membership, or whatever they call, her connection to that game, and they wouldn't do it. In fact, they're so sophisticated. They're doing what they do in Las Vegas, where they have these high rollers and they have a personal representative who calls them up and offers them incentives to keep playing. And they did this to her. And here's the really sad, devastating truth. She got up to $400,000 in debt. And she had not told her husband. And when she told him, he almost divorced her. And then he realized this isn't her fault. She's an addict. She needs help, not recrimination. And so he decided to stay with her and to help her work it out. But can you imagine what that would do? And she kept calling the company and begging them to cut her off. And they not only wouldn't do it, but they kept coming at her with this personal representative to offer more opportunities to lose money. So when you have that kind of thing happening, quote, legally on Facebook, I really question the value, of that mode of communication. They have to get some kind of regulation to protect people from themselves, if nothing else.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I think right now the politicians gave too much freedom to the social media companies. And a lot of times, like why 2016, everyone knows that why Hillary lost her campaign, because a lot of information, fake news, real fake news, came from the Russian hackers or some kind of like international illegal groups. I'm not saying I kind of like I feel like maybe the Trump supporters will tracking me down. I feel a little bit nervous to speak at this moment. Anyway, I think from all the information gradually leaked to the public, I found out actually the 2016 election actually was manipulated, not only Russians, also a lot of international illegal groups were kind of criminal group was behind that 2016 elections. Mm-hmm. The reason they can manipulate that because people very easily leak their personal information to the social media or to the internet. So that's one reason I think we have to pay attention to the privacy issues, and we also have to push the politicians to change their policy to set up to the regulations on the social media companies.
Mm-hmm. I think the other lead in here that Jill was leading towards, and that is the whole question of legality and litigation, the whole legal system, which has been also so broadly manipulated, by the president, is quite astounding to me. I don't know how we have any kind of system of justice when we know that depending upon the integrity and the ethnicity of the legal person handling any case, can go in any direction depending upon how strong the argument is. And we're not very well protected either by the Constitution in terms of checks and balances, because where has someone like Trump been able to get away with so much and dismiss almost the Constitution that is supposed to be, a just document for the benefit of the people. The amount of tampering with all of this really needs oversight tremendously. And that's where I guess the population, the populace, can come in and demand that kind of oversight.
Speaking of oversight and privacy, etc., nowhere else does that occur more than in the industry of financing and housing, because people are kept from housing for credit scores. They're charged more interest rate and more fees just for personal information that comes through those online reports that exist. That in itself is it's almost like an extraction industry that has no oversight to it, and really more careful evaluation to protect the individuals and to protect citizens. This Harvard professor who talks about how the internet shapes who you are just by you responding to it. It's constantly shaping who you are, and gleaning information from you at the same time.
By way of jumping in here and summarizing, this is from a critical review on surveillance capitalism. As the pandemic worsens, it's not just the virus itself that threatens human life. The corruption, cronyism, and incompetence of those in power is adding fuel to the fire. The public deserves to know more than just case counts and death tolls, which is why our reporters are digging deep to break stories on corporate profiteering and political jockeying that undermines public health. And this undermines not only public health, but undermines the very health of the society, of the culture, moving forward in a positive way.
Definitely.
Because we willing to share our privacy to the social medias to the public, eventually the bad force use those informations to change our society, change the result of the election, and eventually impact every individuals in our society. So it's a great the big concern I have now.
Thank you. I want to thank Meng Tang, Rosalie Olton, Jill Waterhouse, and Jill Stebbins for coming today and sharing their time with us and their valuable view about this topic. And thank you all for joining us today.